So hello everyone. I am delighted to be here, and I think in my talk it will be actually high level, no equation, no formula. I think there are some plots, but that's about it. And in some sense, I'm going to give a little bit, provide a summary of what you heard so far, including some of the opaque systems announcements. So my talk is about, I want to argue why confidential computing is inevitable. And basically, this inevitability is driven by two trends. On one hand, you have this kind of desire of the companies to get more and more data. And on the other hand, you have this trend about the growing privacy concerns and regulations, so you reduce the access to this data. So let me start with the first trend. So why is this? And obviously, you heard already quite a bit about it. Today's every organization wants more and more data. Why? Because they want to improve their business. What does this mean? Improve, create new products, new services, add new features to the existing products and services, improve the employee productivity, reduce the cost, and more. And a lot of value right now, it's more and more unlocked with AI. You hear that every day, multiple times a day. And of course, there are many numbers. What will be the impact and things like that? This is one set of numbers from IDC, which basically they estimate that by 2030, the value coming from AI, processing this kind of huge amount of data, it will be about additional net revenue of $16 trillion. And this also impacts the GDP of local economies by 26%. These are staggering numbers. We'll see what will happen. But anyway, the people are extremely optimistic about it. Companies don't want only to get more data, but also they want to take advantage of their own data and get more and more third-party data. And why is that? Well, there are many reasons. But let's continue the theme of this AI and large language model. So it is speculated that large language models are actually, the new version are running out of data to train on. And then the companies developing these models like OpenAI, like Google or Cohere or Anthropic, are already using all the available public data to train these models, right? All books, articles, movies, the web, all the information on the web, really all the information ever created, public information ever created by humans. And this information doesn't grow as much. So what they do in order to further improve their models, now they are paying millions, tens of millions of dollars for proprietary data to use it to further train and improve their models. Then, there are, in addition to that, obviously, right now, if you are a company, it's a little, AI becomes at some level of commodity. Everyone can use ChatGPT, right? There are more and more open source models which are perform better and better. These are commodities. So then what is your differentiation? Well, the differentiation, it's your data, right? Because if you can fine-tune the model or train on your data, presumably you are going to get better results. Like think about you implement your own customer support, or you are going to do search on your internal documents, or you are going to do Copilot on your code base, right, and things like that. Finally, companies, they also want to access third-party data in addition to their proprietary data, public data, and so forth. Why? Again, to improve their business outcomes. So, for instance, banks want to collect data about retail data about the users' buying behaviors to assess loan default risks. And finally, also, companies and organizations want to use a state-of-the-art services out there on the internet, like ChatGPT. And in order to do so, they need to send content, information, sometimes very valuable information, to these systems, right? Like proprietary code, legal document, and so forth. So in summary, organizations want to access more and more data, uh, um, and public, proprietary, third party, everything they can. And at the same time, they also want to access the best services out there, which means also for them to send data to these services. And all of these desires, unfortunately, are at odds with this other trend, which is a growing privacy concerns and regulations. Okay? And why is that? Well, for these are very legitimate concerns, right? Because now it's easier than ever to expose the data, right? Again, think about our ChatGPT example. You just cut and paste some of the text to get an answer, right? And that can be, again, in many cases, it's your code, for instance. But the code, it can be proprietary code or legal document or something like that. And this is not in theory. It's actually, there is a recent a study which basically shows that, and it's conducted across employees from multiple industries. And basically across, as you might imagine, the number of kind of exposures when using ChatGPT skyrocketed, of course, since it is released. But on May 31st, it's alone, in one day, it turns out that 8% of the employees using these services exposed some kind of confidential content of their company. And of course, the last is that regulations are growing, right? You don't have only now GDPR or California Consumer Privacy Act, as you heard, and you all know the European Union. It's provided the first pass on the regulation for AI, and then you have things like countries like France push for operational sovereignty in addition to data sovereignty, which means that you are allowed to process some high security data only in data centers which are managed by the nationals of that country. Okay, so in summary, on one hand, you have customers and organizations who want to use more and more data to improve their business outcome. And on the other hand, you have these privacy concerns and regulations which are limiting the access to the data. So clearly, this is a tension. It's a big tension, and the tension is growing, right? You have more and more data, there will be more and more regulations. So how you bridge this divide? And the solution here, and that's why I was saying it's inevitable, is confidential computing. So computing on confidential data. But what is confidential data, right? Well, confidential data, it's not an easy answer. What is confidential data is not an easy answer. Because for once, confidential data, there is no recognizable pattern. Again, think about ChatGPT. You can ask questions, you can post a code, it's a code, it's about legal documents, can be a table, which you want to have a summarization of the trends, and things like that. Second, the regulation evolves rapidly. What today is data, what data is today non-confidential, tomorrow can be confidential, right? And finally, it's beyond this obvious intellectual property and PII data. What is confidential also is defined by the organization itself, right? Take something like the energy consumption of a data center, right? It doesn't seem a big deal. And it's not like for a public utility, that's not confidential data. However, for a cloud, it can be confidential data because that's a proxy to the competitiveness of that cloud, right? Now, the other question, of course, is this confidential data is hard to define, try to figure out, but then, how much is this, right? How big is this a problem? Again, you have different studies here, and this is again an IDC study, which basically says that more than 1/3 of the data in the digital universe requires some kind of protection, right? Next is that you may ask, how much of this is actually protected? The same study says 20%. So more than 20% of the data that should be protected is not protected, right? And obviously, the enterprises are going to bear the responsibility and the liability for this data, right? This is another take on the data. It's actually more data here. It's what happens over time, right? The data which requires protection increase a percentage. The answer, yes, it increased, like you'd expect, right? Because more regulations, company decides that more data should be confidential and things like that. And there are different categories here: privacy, compliance, custodial, confidential, and lockdown. Like this from privacy is basically, you download some YouTube video and you put your address, right? It's like, and the custodial is basically account information, which may result if exposed to identity theft. A lockdown is a higher security, it's military intelligence, for instance, okay? Now, let's, finally, we want to give some more examples of the use cases. And again, you heard about those. When sharing, this kind of private, confidential data brings significant value to the business, right? And one example, it's obvious, it's banking, right? Bankings may be incentivized to collaborate, right? To discover fraudulent activity. Takes money laundering, right? With money laundering, the criminal is doing multiple transactions and is doing these transactions across multiple financial organizations to cover her or his tracks, right? So the only way to really detect some of this fraudulent activity like money launderers is for multiple financial institutions to put together their data and to discover this kind of, say, a cycle in the transaction, and therefore that will be a signal of money laundering activity, right? But again, a bank cannot just expose its the data of the transaction of its customers, just like that. Another example where you can get a lot of value by sharing the data is, for instance, hospitals which might want to collaborate with drug research companies to accelerate development by sharing patient and clinical data, right? Again, this is confidential data, but you can see the value here. And a final example is manufacturing, right? You have long supply chains and you have companies which design the parts and others which manufacture the parts. And the companies who design the part has to share some information, and some of the information contain intellectual property data to the other company which is going to manufacture that part. Again, in all these examples, all parties are incentivized to share the data, right? But cannot, or it's very hard to do. And obviously, this is what confidential computing is about. And you heard and you've seen the Rishabh demo. Opaque aims to address these challenges, right? To make it easy to build this application I just talked about, which today you cannot do it, right? Opaque provides secure multi-party analytics and AI, right? So basically, it allows companies to do exactly what I said, to share their proprietary data, right? And do analytics and train models and serve models, AI models, on top of this data. And it provides very strong security properties. If you are going to share your data confidential data with other parties, even if all the other parties are going to get compromised, your data is not going to leak. Then you have zero trust clean rooms. Many companies provide clean rooms today where you have data from different parties, maybe joined, say on the customer IDs or things like that. But Opaque solution, what is different is zero trust. Most of the other solutions need to trust the company, the provider of the clean room, right? But here you don't need to trust anyone, including Opaque. Privacy-preserving LLMs. So this is about, you have, LLMs is all the rage today, and how you make sure that, the queries, whatever queries you are going to send to LLM, the LLM is not going to leak the information on which was trained. And multi-level policy enforcement. Like in any enterprise and so forth, you have different, different employees. They have different clearance in terms of security. So you need to be able to have sophisticated controls, so you can and policy enforcement, right? So to allow everyone only to get access to the data it's allowed to get. And finally, of course, when you want build an application, you want to have end-to-end data and encryption. So finally, looking forward, we believe three things will happen. More and more workloads will require confidential computing. That's what I try to motivate in my talk, and this is what you heard during the summit, and this is why you are here. The second is that there will be a lot of techniques. You heard about techniques, technologies being developed to solve problems. And we believe that in time, they are going to be able to seamlessly operate. So you can stitch them together to support an end-to-end data workflow. And finally, we believe that we are going to see a democratization of confidential computing. So you can use confidential computing in your application without being an expert. And this will dramatically enhance the security of data processing and enable companies to fully realize the value of their data. And ultimately, we believe that this will lead to a more secure and safer world. Thank you.